Okay, so you're thinking about changing careers or maybe changing jobs. Perhaps you haven't looked in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or even several decades. And the question comes to mind, what do I do? How do I start this? Where do I even begin? Well, today we're going to talk about what I call the four quadrants of the job search landscape. And this is really kind of a formalized sales process for helping you think about how you're going to go ahead and engage and look for that next great opportunity, that next great dream job. Don't kid yourself. This is a sales process. You are both the product and the salesperson. And as soon as you can move forward in that direction, follow these steps, you're going to be much better off. So if this is really interesting to you, come on board, join us, and let's get going. Welcome to the Dream Job America podcast. I'm your host, Tim Tanella, where we talk about all things hiring, specifically strategies, tools, and tactics for helping you find your next dream job. Today, we're going to talk about what I call the four quadrants of the job search landscape. And another way to look at this is we're going to look at a methodology or a framework for selling. Now, one of the biggest challenges people have when they think about making a career change or they're actively engaged in trying to find a new job is they're not really sure where to even start. I mean, how are things different in 2023 for a lot of you, particularly senior leaders, business executives? You may have been in your role for a while. You may have not formally looked for a job for many, many years or many, many decades. Perhaps you got lucky. You found it through a network connection. A recruiter brought an opportunity to you, or you even got acquired into it through a transaction that happened with your business. And now you're back on the market. You don't want to lose all that cash burn. You're thinking, how on earth do I decide? What do I do today? Do I dust off the old resume? Do I call a recruiter? What on earth do I do? Do I talk to everybody I know? So the question of how do I even begin comes to mind. So today we're going to talk about a framework, what I call the four quadrants of the job search landscape, for helping you think about how to even begin and how to set the stage for where you're going to spend your time and your activities to prepare for this new campaign. Now, the first thing we have to think about before we even get into the four quadrants is this recognition that looking for a job is an actual sales process. It's not something that you kind of willy-nilly go out and you call different people and you try to pitch yourself. You are actually a product. Like any other product, you're going to have features and benefits, and you also happen to be a person. Like any sales process, it's going to follow the basic tenets. So if you're selling a product, there's the ideal buyer that you're going after. There's the basic brand and messaging, and then there's the distribution, or where you actually show up, how you get the product to the market, whether it's direct selling, whether it's an online presence. The same thing is really involved when you're looking at a job search, except now you're the product and you're the salesperson. You have to figure out what the brand and the messaging is going to be. And then you have to determine what are going to be the most impactful channels of distribution where my message is going to show up. And that can be through seemingly a passive activity, like where you're discovered online, but it's also going to be proactive things that you're going to do, such as activating your network, reaching out to a target list of potential folks you want to build relationships with who are in those ecosystems. And we're going to walk through that right now so you have at least a place that you can start off when you first get going. Look, I know it's very stressful. Been through it before. I've worked with hundreds of clients that have been through it and are going through it. And that's the reason for putting this channel together. So let's jump into that. And hopefully this is going to make your life a lot less painful. And it's going to actually make it kind of exciting and fun to get going. So the first quadrant we're going to talk about is your personal brand. And again, let's think of it like you are the product. Put yourself in that mindset. I've got this thing, I'm going to sell it. What's the story of how it came to be? What is it that it does that's unique and special that people are willing to pay a premium for in the future? What makes you or this thing completely unique and differentiated, and what are the things that help make you stand out so that people want to reach out directly and get that initial engagement so you can discover whether there's an opportunity there or not for you. So as you get started, you kind of really want to think about, if somebody asks me, tell me about your background, tell me what you've done in your career, tell me about the impact you've made, what would you come out with if you only had a couple minutes to talk about that? So you can call this an elevator pitch. You can call it a short form infomercial. It doesn't really matter. But for a lot of people that I'm used to working with, they've been very successful and they've been working for 10, 20, 30 years. They've done a lot of different things. The problem is the person who's looking to potentially hire you, who has a very specific agenda and a very specific need, they don't really care about that so much as they care about what their personal agenda is. So you've got to be able to hit them and hit them really hard with a couple minutes of information where they kind of get it very quickly. So for a lot of people, it's going to be more than just describing all the things that you did and the different jobs that you have, but you got to find a way of pulling that together and really sitting back and thinking for a minute, what is it that I have done in terms of patterns of success over my career that are repeatable, that show high measurable impact, that's differentiated from maybe other people out there. I've got to come up with that quick messaging about myself to even think about, well, what's going to make me different than the other 1,000 CMOs that I'm competing against for a job? Or pick your poison, right? Product managers or customer service reps or chief executive officers, right? The people who are looking to bring you on board, they want to get a sense really quickly, should I move on from this person or should I engage them? So understanding impact and what makes you different is going to be very, very important, establishing what is your personal brand. So quadrant number 2 is going to be identifying your target buyer. And you think about it this way. We have a saying at my firm, which is don't look for your next job, look for your next boss. Because in most cases, you're going to be working for a single individual. Now, I understand you may be part of a team and there could be a matrixed structure if you're, a high-level C-level executive, but nevertheless, you're primarily working for either one or two people, and they generally have a very specific agenda, things they're trying to accomplish and things they're trying to achieve. And you could tell the most wonderful story of all the impact that you've made and all the wonderful things you've done throughout your career, but if it's not something that really matters to them, you're going to get a nice nod, but you're never getting called back again. So like any product, when I talk to executives who've been around for a while, a lot of them make that mistake of wanting to talk about all the cool things they've done in their career. And what ends up happening is they put together kind of a very dispersed message. And then when they're competing against somebody that has a very direct message, it's completely in alignment with the needs of the buyer, they kind of wonder why I didn't call back. And so if you were going to sell a product and I brought you in as my sales manager and asked what's going to be your go-to market strategy, and you said, I'm just going to start calling every company in my contact level from A to Z, you'd probably be thrown out of there, right? Because every product is designed with a certain market in mind. Even more than a market, there's a specific buyer. What position level they're at the company? What type of cultural fit are they looking for? What kind of person they like to work with? There's all these different ways. There's psychographic profiles. There's a million different things. And the best way to start is to go into this thinking, yeah, I'm going to work for a company ultimately, but I'm going to try to figure out who is the individual that I really want to work with, because that's the person I have to impress. If I can impress them and I can help them meet whatever their personal agenda is, then obviously if they're at a high level in the corporation, that's going to benefit the company as well. So that's going to be very, very important to try to factor out all these things in advance. Now, you just can't target everybody, again, as I said, because there's so much competition out there and the barriers to entry to just reach out to people through LinkedIn or email are very, very low. So you're better off figuring out what type of person do I want to go after and what type of message am I going to customize based on my background, so that person hears that story, sees that message and says, wow, this person seems like they're right on for what I'm looking at. Let me get his or her name, number, and reach out to them individually. Now, when I start thinking about that target buyer, I try to develop that profile, right? And sometimes we call it the client avatar. But I try to develop that profile in conjunction with thinking about what the candidate's personal brand is. In other words, as you're going through this process, you kind of want to be working on personal story and brand combined with target buyer at once. Because if you're building a product, the product folks would be working with the product marketing folks. And as they develop new product feature sets, they're tailoring the marketing around those features and those benefits, again, towards a specific type of buyer. So I think as you go through this, you're going to one side of the balance sheet and the other side of the balance sheet, and it's going to be a process of constant refining, because as you develop more things about yourself, that may shift the way you think about the type of person who's buying, or vice versa. As you build a deep list of what exactly that person would look like, you may find I'm going to have to go back and change the initial storyline that I was telling myself, so there is a greater sense of alignment in the process. So the two work symbiotically, and that's okay. You don't have to work on one versus the other. Kind of work on the two in conjunction as you go through this initial kind of assessment. So quadrant number 3 is going to be developing a killer messaging strategy. Now, this is really, really a significant part of the process, because I have found that people don't respond to 10 different things. They read one headline, it connects with them, they get really excited. So you're going to have a messaging platform that combines a lot of things that you've done in your career, so that someone looks at that and is just blown away and says, my gosh, I have to know more. So again, we need to talk about overall what the impact that you're used to making for organizations are, why that impact was material and relevant to the companies that you've been at before, and why that impact would be important to the type of target buyer that you're going after. And when we talk about messaging, this is kind of a conceptual message, right? So it's not just a paragraph. It's a way of thinking and expressing what is that you do across all the different mediums. So we talked a little bit earlier in one of the previous videos about your LinkedIn profile. That messaging has to permeate all aspects of the LinkedIn profile, and your resume, and your cover letters, and any type of direct marketing outreach that you go. It's going to have keywords that support that messaging. And again, that messaging is going to have to show that I am an authority in the space in which I'm working, or I'm authority inside a particular, let's say, problem that we're trying to achieve. So we may be in different industries, but we've kind of dealt with similar problems, and we have a methodology for kind of replicating that and being successful over and over and again. For example, if you are trying to get into the software as a service space, part of your messaging is going to have to be showing that you've been in that space, that you understand all the challenges and the issues specific to that vertical over a period of time, because the person who is in that space is looking for someone who can come in, hit the ground running, and has been there, done that, solved those problems before. Similarly, if you are in a certain functional role, you want to show the impact that you've made previously in that functional role. And I sometimes call this like the 3 tripods. So you've got your industry, you've got the way that you add value, and you've got your functional role, the 3 stools of the step, as we should say. So ask yourself this question as a core message. What is it that I'm able to do consistently that puts me in the top quadrant of performance relative to other people in my same space? That would be an important thing to know. Ask yourself the question, why would the other person I'm trying to reach out really, really care? Does that person, based on my messaging, see me as someone exceptional relative to my peers or other people in the industry? Be ready to answer the question if somebody throws it at you. What's your biggest win? Why was that important to the organization? And why is that important to me? These are the types of things that you have to be thinking about before you get started, because that's the messaging that you are going to build throughout your entire program, whether it's in an email or a letter or a social media site, whether it's your elevator pitch if you run into someone while you're waiting in line at a Starbucks, or if you're having just general conversation, you run into someone out and about at a social setting or some type of event. And one way to see if it's really memorable and impactful is do that pitch really quickly to somebody you care about. So I'm not saying you do it for your 5-year-old. They're not going to understand, right? But somebody that is a fellow coworker or somebody that you respect who is in a similar industry or is in business, and ask them the question, hey, if you ask me this and I responded back this way, would you be really, really impressed? Would you literally be blown away? And if they say, yeah, that's really impressive for sure, then you know that you've got that foundation now to work off to build the messaging script off of. And let's move on quickly to the fourth quadrant, which is distribution. Now think of distribution as the various channels in which I'm going to show up. So a lot of people call me and they're just thinking, hey, I got this kind of half-baked LinkedIn profile and put together a resume and I did this formal cover letter. Well, there's a lot of other ways in which people successfully look for jobs today. And you want to have a strategy that's going to have you show up in a lot of different places. So you want to have both a proactive process, discoverable, reactive places that you're going to show up as well. So anything that happens to do where people will discover you through research, through a Google search, through LinkedIn tools. So you're going to be on, you've got a LinkedIn profile. You may have other social media profiles. Some people use Facebook and people using Instagram today sometimes to communicate their brand and the message, even when they're looking for a job. You may have a private website that you're going to use as a simple click link that's going to allow you to tell your story in a more effective way than rather long form or long form prose. You're probably going to have an outbound strategy, which is when I'm having a conversation with a recruiter, right? And they're reviewing like my resume. What's the story I'm going to tell that recruiter that's going to make that big impact upon them? I'm going to do a lot of direct outreach, let's say. So I'm going to my network. What's the story and the message I'm going to tell that network, right? To get them to mobilize, to take action for me. And finally, I should also consider, which I think is one of the most powerful, is a direct outreach via email where you're targeting people that you've done through research. If you get a warm introduction, that's wonderful, but usually you're just doing on a cold basis. And sometimes you can even set up an automation cycle in email around that. But there's all these different touch points in which you are distributing your product out to the world. And of course, that product is the message about you, that you're this wonderful person who can make a difference in their business. And so as you begin putting together your messaging and thinking about how I'm going to get up every morning and start looking for something new, you really have to have like a multi-channel approach. And that's what this focus on number 4 is all about. Okay, now you maybe ask yourself, Tim, it all sounds really great, this kind of big overview, but what do I really do? What are the questions I should be asking people? What are the questions I should be asking myself? How do I make an initial assessment of what I'm really good at? How do I think about how I structure things and where that message actually show up? Well, here's the good news. I've put all of this information together in my 4-step job preparation guide, which you can find if you go to the website, www.jobamerica.com/guide. You can take a look at the screen and there should be a hyperlink in the show notes below. Click that, it'll take you to a website. You can then download your free 4-step job preparation guide. And this guide is for preparing to launch your job search, and it goes into detail. It's about 10 pages long, and it's in a PDF format, and it's going to have so many of the questions that you're going to be able to ask in order to then direct you to begin putting together not only the strategy, but some of the tactics that you're going to need to move forward with this process. So most of those questions are going to be answered in the guide. I'd really, really encourage you to go ahead and do that. It's completely free. There's no cost to you whatsoever. And people that have seen it before and reviewed it really thought it was a wonderful starting point so they could get grounded to begin their search. So that's it for today. If you enjoyed, the content of this show, please let me know. Hit the subscribe button. I'm going to try to build a strong membership up to keep on providing content that I've learned over the years, kind of unique insights that are a little bit different than you're going to find on the internet. Hit the like button. Of course, that's good for the algorithm. But most importantly, if there's content that really matters to you, something you're struggling with, something you'd like me to make a video about, please let me know in the comments below and we'll go ahead and make a video about it. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to seeing you in the next couple weeks on the